I am writing these lines while my hands are still trembling, and I'm not sure if I should post it or not, but I need someone to know what happened, just in case I can't go back there to quit tomorrow. My name is Mark, 24 years old, and I'm a broke student trying to pay off my rent. That is the only reason I took this job. $25 an hour just to sit and watch a pile of rubble and old concrete. Sounds like a bargain, right? That's what I thought when I saw the ad on Craigslist 3 weeks ago. Night security guard needed. Street Jude Hospital. Start immediately. Street Jude is located at the edge of town. A crude architectural block from the 62nd sitting isolated among old oak trees. It has been closed for 5 years following an asbestos scandal and budget cuts. At least, that's what the press reported. When I arrived for my first shift last Monday night, the building manager just handed me a heavy bunch of keys, a flashlight as big as a police baton, and a curt warning. Don't let junkies sneak into steel copper wire, and don't go into the sealed areas. The structure there isn't safe. He left at 9:45 p.m., leaving me alone in the vast lobby, where the soaring ceiling swallowed the faint light from my desk lamp. The job was actually very boring. My duty was to patrol the lower floors every 2 hours, ensuring all exits were locked tight, then returning to the desk in the main lobby to scroll on my phone or doze off. The hospital had been cut off from the main power grid, with only a weak backup system running a generator to maintain the exit signs and security cameras on the ground floor. But there was something about the silence here that made me uncomfortable from the very first night. You know, old buildings usually make noises. The sound of wood settling, wind drafting through door cracks, mice running on the drop ceiling. But Street Jude did not. It was absolutely silent. A heavy, thick silence, as if the building itself was holding its breath to listen to my footsteps. The air inside was always about 5 degrees colder than outside, and it carried a very distinct scent. Not the musty smell of a typical abandoned house. It was the smell of old, pungent antiseptic, mixed with the smell of rusty metal like dried blood. Tonight is my third shift. Everything went normally until about 1 a.m. I had just finished my patrol of the first floor and returned to the desk. I poured myself a cup of stone-cold coffee from a thermos, trying to stay awake. The blue light from the phone screen was the only thing anchoring me to reality. Sitting opposite me, on the wall behind the reception counter, was an old control panel for the nurse call system. It was a grid of small bulbs numbering the rooms, once used to signal when a patient needed help. Of course, it had been dead for a long time. Dust covered the plastic glass thick, and the bulbs inside were dark. At least, I thought it was dead. At 1:12 a.m., as I was absently staring into the void, a sound rang out, tearing through the silence. Not loud, but in this dead space, it sounded like a gunshot. Click. That was the sound of an electric relay switching on. I snapped my head up, heart pounding. The nurse call control panel, which should have been disconnected 5 years ago, suddenly showed signs of life. A tiny, bright red bulb began to blink in the corner of the board. I squinted, trying to see through the opaque layer of dust on the plastic glass. Beneath that blinking red light was a number written in faded black ink. 304. At first, I didn't feel scared at all. The human brain's first reaction is always to seek logic. Short circuit, I told myself. Probably sewer rats the size of calves chewing through the old wiring in the walls and causing a short. Anyway, the backup generator is ancient. Unstable current is normal. But then, the sound started. Not a loud siren. It started as a low hum, like a mosquito flying right by your ear, then slowly turned into a steady, sharp, beep, beep, beep tone. I checked my watch. 1:14 a.m. That beeping echoed in the empty lobby, bouncing off the marble walls, and coming back, sounding as if it was coming from every direction. The more I listened, the more my brain ached. It didn't sound like random mechanical failure. Its rhythm was too regular, too urgent, like someone pressing the call button continuously, patiently waiting for an attendant who would never come. Damn it, I cursed under my breath, my own voice sounding lost. I couldn't sit here all night with this nerve-wracking sound. I grabbed the baton flashlight, stood up, and pushed the chair back. The sound of chair legs screeching on the tile floor made me jump. I have to go up there. I have to turn that damn thing off. Room 304 is on the 3rd floor, the old intensive care unit. The stairwell was pitch black and reeked of drywall dust. My flashlight beam swept over walls covered in messy graffiti. I counted each step to stay calm. 1, 2, 3. The second floor passed in silence. But when I set foot on the third floor landing, the atmosphere changed completely. It was cold, much colder than the ground floor. My breath began to condense into thin wisps of smoke in the flashlight beam. And that smell, that pungent antiseptic smell, hit my nose again, stronger than ever. It was so strong I could taste the bitterness of the chemicals settling in my throat. How could a hospital abandoned for 5 years smell like it was just cleaned this morning? I walked down the long, narrow corridor. On both sides, hospital room doors were wide open like gaping black mouths. My flashlight beam only illuminated about 5 meters ahead, the rest swallowed by darkness. The beep, beep. Sound was no longer coming from a speaker, but I could hear the physical sound of a relay switching on and off somewhere ahead. Room 302. Room 303. And here it is. Room 304. The door was ajar. A faint strip of red light spilled from the crack, blinking in rhythm with the sound. My heart pounded in my chest. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, took a deep breath, and kicked the door open with my foot. "Is anyone there?" "I'm security," I yelled, my voice hardening to hide the trembling. No answer, only the steady beep, beep. I walked in. The room was bare. No bed, no bedside table, no machines. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust with no footprints. Only a rusty iron bed frame lay neglected in the corner. On the wall, right next to where the headboard used to be, was the nurse call button panel. The tiny indicator light on it was flashing madly. I approached, my trembling finger touching the cancel reset button. The plastic was ice cold. Click. The beeping died instantly. The red light vanished. The room plunged into darkness and absolute silence immediately. I let out a sigh of relief, scoffing at my own paranoia. Just a short circuit, Mark. You watch too many horror movies. I turned to walk out, but just as my heel hit the threshold, I froze. On the thick layer of dust covering the floor, right next to where I was standing, was a long trail. Like someone had just dragged a heavy object from the corner of the room to the door. The drag mark was very fresh, cutting through the murky dust, and it led straight out into the hallway, towards the dark rooms at the end of the row. I didn't follow that drag trail. Call me a coward if you want, but when you stand alone in the dark on the third floor of an abandoned hospital at 1 a.m., the survival instinct will override curiosity. I turned and ran straight down the stairs, locking the security office door and turning on every flashlight until the sun rose. I planned to quit the very next morning, but then a text from my landlord popped up. "Rent is 3 days late, Mark." Desperation has its own way of strangling fear. I convinced myself that the drag trail was made by some animal, or maybe by some junkies who had snuck in earlier. Night 4. I returned to Street Jude. This time I was better prepared. I brought 2 thermoses of strong coffee and a pocket folding knife, which I told myself was for cutting cardboard box straps. I tried not to look up at the nurse call panel, gluing my eyes to a thick psychology textbook. Time passed slowly like thick honey. 1:14 a.m. Nothing happened. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe it really was just a random short circuit, but that fake piece shattered at 2:27 a.m. This time there was no gentle relay click to warn me. Screech! An ear-piercing shriek rang out from the ceiling speaker system, so loud that I jumped and spilled my coffee all over my pants. That sound was like a microphone placed right next to a speaker, resonating into a frequency that could rupture eardrums. It lasted for about 3 seconds, then died out, leaving a buzzing silence in my ears. Immediately after, the nurse call panel lit up again, but this time it wasn't just one bulb. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. Beep, beep, beep. The signals were rapid, overlapping each other to create a chaotic cacophony. I stared at the number board, heart pounding in my throat. 3 red lights were flashing madly. Room 312, Room 315, Room 320. I stood frozen, a cold sensation running down my spine. Not because of ghosts, but because of an obvious truth. A logical error that my brain refused to process. Right above my desk, taped to the wall, was the building's old fire escape plan, with faded blue and red guidelines. I knew that map. I had looked at it 100 times out of boredom. I turned around, shining my flashlight on the map to confirm the crazy thing I was thinking. Floor 1, Admin and ER. Floor 2, Pediatrics and Maternity. Floor 3, ICU and High Dependency. My trembling finger traced the level 3 drawing. The East Wing corridor, where I went last night, was drawn very clearly. Squares representing patient rooms ran along the corridor. 301, 302, 308, 309, 310, and the final wall was right after room 310. No turns, no side corridors. The building ended there. I turned back to the control panel. 3 red lights continued to blink mockingly. 312, 315, 320. If the map is correct, then those rooms are floating in midair outside the brick walls of the building. Either the map is wrong, or something new. One has just been created on the 3rd floor. And then, amidst the steady beeping, I heard another sound echoing down from the stairwell. The clattering sound of dry oiled metal wheels rolling on tile floors. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It is moving, and it is heading towards the stairs. The clattering of wheels echoed down the stairs like the sound of shattered bones being crushed under weight. Reason screamed at me to run away immediately. Run out the front door, throw the keys into the bushes, and never look back. But my legs wouldn't listen. A strange, sickly pull from the darkness above was dragging me closer. Or perhaps, simply, I didn't believe it. I don't believe in ghosts. I need to see the thing making that sound to prove I'm not crazy. I gripped the folding knife in my left hand, flashlight in my right, and started climbing the stairs once more. Floor 2 passed. Silence. When I set foot on floor 3, the cold hit instantly, but this time it carried a sticky, wet humidity. The antiseptic smell had changed. It was harsher, sourer, like the smell of formaldehyde used for embalming. I stood at the head of the hallway, pointing my flashlight forward. The white beam of light cut through the dense night. I started walking, mentally counting each room to reassure myself. 301, 302, 303. The corridor was still normal. Rotting wooden doors, peeling paint, revealing the gray brick underneath. 308, 309, 310. I stopped. According to the map, this was the end. Before me should have been a concrete wall, where an old fire extinguisher hung and a window looked out to the parking lot in the back. But there was no wall. My flashlight beamed into the void ahead, and the light seemed to be swallowed up. The corridor continued. It stretched endlessly into the darkness, deeper than any physical architecture of this building would allow. My throat was dry. I took another step, crossing the boundary of room 310. It felt like stepping through an invisible film of water. The air suddenly became heavy, pressing tight against my chest. My ears popped as if a plane was landing too fast. I shined my light on the first door on the left in this new area. The room number plate was polished brass, absolutely free of a single speck of dust, starkly contrasting with the ruin around it. 311. And right next to it, 312. The door to room 312 was wide open. The squeak, squeak sound rang out again, clear as day. It came from the pitch-black darkness further down, where my flashlight beam could not reach. Something was pushing a metal cart towards me from the very end of this non-existent hallway. I stood frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Then I heard a voice, not through a speaker, but a real voice, soft but echoing in this irrational space. A female voice, monotone, emotionless. Time for your medication, Mr. Miller. Stop hiding. And from the darkness ahead, a figure began to emerge at the very edge of the flashlight's range. A white nurse uniform. Old. Yellowed. But she was walking backwards. My flashlight trembled, creating patchy streaks of light on the wall. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but my body was completely paralyzed. Have you ever seen a spider move? The way its legs jerk, unnaturally? That is exactly how that nurse was moving. Her back was towards me, but her speed approaching me was alarmingly fast. Her arms twisted backward at an angle. Human shoulder joints could not perform. Pale hands gripping tight the handle of the metal medicine cart. Squeak. Squeak. The cart was dragged along with each of her backward steps. Her head slumped onto her chest, or was it slumped backward? Matted black hair covering her nape. She is getting close. Too close. Survival instinct finally prevailed. I lunged to the left, diving into the nearest door. Room 311. I turned off the flashlight immediately, pressing my back tight against the cold wall right next to the door, hands covering my mouth to stifle the gasping. In the darkness, my hearing became painfully acute. The sound of metal wheels stopped right outside the door I was hiding behind. The space was silent for about 3 seconds. The 3 longest seconds of my life. I could hear the dripping sound of liquid falling onto the hallway floor. Drip. Drip. Then that voice rang out again, this time right against the thin wall. Patient in room 311. Low blood pressure. Needs adrenaline injection. My heart felt like it stopped, but my door did not open. Instead, I heard the clatter of metal hitting metal, the sound of a syringe package tearing. And then, the footsteps continued moving. Squeak. Squeak. She continued towards room 312 opposite. I waited until the wheel sound faded before daring to exhale. Cold sweat soaked the back of my shirt. I tremblingly turned the flashlight on to the lowest setting, cupping my hand over the lens so light wouldn't escape. I needed to see where I was to find a way out, and that was when the second horror struck. Room 311 was not like the rest of the hospital. No dust, no cobwebs, no peeling paint. The floor was polished to a shine, reflecting the dim light. The hospital bed was made with crisp white sheets, and on the gleaming metal bedside cabinet, a glass of water with cold condensation droplets still on the outside. Next to it was a food tray with a bowl of tomato soup still steaming hot. I reached out and touched the soup bowl. It was hot. I am in a hospital, cut off from power and abandoned for 5 years. But this room looked like someone had occupied it just 5 minutes ago. I backed away, bumping into the built-in wardrobe. The door popped open. There were no patient clothes inside. Inside the closet was plastered with yellow sticky notes, layer upon layer. The handwriting was hasty, scribbled, bold ink strokes, as if the writer was in extreme panic. I shined my light on the nearest note at eye level. The words made my blood run cold. The exit has disappeared. The hallway is one way only. Don't let the head nurse see your face. Don't look in the mirror. How long have I been here? Is it time for medication? And below, a line underlined 3 times. Mark, you shouldn't have taken this shift. I stared at my name written in scribbled black ink. A wave of nausea hit me, twisting in my stomach. Not out of fear, but because of a realization even more terrible. That handwriting. Those crooked, shaky letters. It looked exactly like my own handwriting, but I never wrote it. I swear, I have never set foot in this room before. I yanked the sticky note down, crumpling it in my hand. Heat from the tomato soup still rose, carrying a metallic, fishy smell, making the air in the room so suffocating I couldn't breathe. I have to get out of here, immediately. I turned off the flashlight, tiptoed to the exit, and peeked out into the hallway. The corridor was empty. No sign of that nurse monster anywhere. The squeak of wheels was also gone. Only the row of fluorescent lights on the ceiling remained, which I was sure were not on earlier, now flickering, emitting a sickly yellow light. This is the only chance. I rushed out of room 311, turned left, heading towards where room 310 and the stairs should be. I ran for my life, sneakers slamming hard on the tiled floor. Only one thought in my head. Run to the stairs, down to floor 1, burst through the main door, and never return. I ran past room 312, room 313, room 314. Wait. I skidded to a halt, soles leaving a long streak on the floor. Cold sweat poured down my forehead. I was running towards the exit. I remembered clearly I came from that direction, but the numbers on the doors, they were increasing. I whipped around. Behind me, where I just ran past, were rooms 315, 316. The corridor stretched infinitely in both directions. No stairs, no end wall, no window looking out to the parking lot. I was standing in an endless tunnel of closed hospital doors. Impossible? I whispered, voice cracking. What the hell is this? I ran back. I ran madly, ignoring silence. I ran past 10, 20 doors. My lungs burned. But no matter which way I ran, the numbers continued to dance irrationally. 340, 341, 342. Street Jude Hospital only has a maximum of 20 rooms per floor. Exhausted, I leaned against the wall, sliding down to the ground. I looked at my wristwatch. The second hand was spinning backwards. And then, the intercom system on the ceiling crackled to life again. This time, the sound was clearer, no more static noise. Announcement for Security Officer Mark. The voice rang out, artificially cheerful, like the voice of an 80-seconds flight attendant. You have strayed from your patrol area. Please return to the central nurse station for roll call. Repeat. Do not try to find the stairs. We have removed them for maintenance. The speaker died. Immediately, about 10 meters away, a door slowly opened. Pale green light spilled from inside. It was room 350. And from inside that room, I heard a landline phone ringing. Ring. Ring. That was my mobile phone ringtone. I patted my pocket. Empty. The cold sensation running down my spine then didn't come from the room temperature, but from a blatant violation of reality. My phone, an inseparable object I just used to check the time minutes ago, had vanished from my pocket and was now ringing loudly inside room 350 over there. I walked into the room, limbs stiff as wood and stone. This room was not a hospital room. It looked like a twisted, crude copy of the security station on the ground floor. An old battered metal desk sat in the middle of the room. The wall was covered with old CRT monitors emitting a pale greenish light, the only light source I had seen from the hallway. And on the desk, my familiar cracked screen iPhone was vibrating violently, sliding gradually towards the edge of the desk to the rhythm of the default ringtone. But the smell here, oh God, the acrid ozone smell of burning electronics mixed with the stench of rotting meat. It was like someone had cooked a piece of spoiled meat in a microwave. I had to cover my nose with my shirt to keep from retching. I approached the desk. The phone screen displayed the caller, building manager. I had never saved his number in my contacts. I hesitated for a second, then my trembling fingers slid the answer button. I put the phone to my ear, eyes still glued to the darkness in the hallway through the open door frame. Hello? My voice cracked. The other end was silent, only breathing. A raspy, labored, wet breathing, like someone trying to breathe through a trachea filled with fluid. You have broken the rules. A voice hissed, distorted, and broken like a chewed-up cassette tape. Shift, not, over. Who are you? I want out. Where are the stairs? I screamed into the phone. Look at the screens. I lowered the phone, looking up at the wall of surveillance monitors in front of me. There were about 12 monitors, most of them showing black and white static, but one in the bottom right corner was the clearest. It was showing footage from a high-angle security camera. On the screen was me. I was standing in room 350, holding the phone, looking terrified. But that wasn't what made my heart stop. On the screen right next to it, showing the hallway angle outside room 350, I saw her. That dirty white nurse figure was standing right at the edge of the door to the room I was in. She wasn't walking backwards anymore. She was standing still, pressing herself against the wall right next to the door frame. Her head, with matted black hair, was slowly, very slowly, tilting around the door edge to look inside. I looked at the screen. The head in the camera was leaning in. I glanced out the real door. Saw nothing. She is very shy. The voice on the phone rang out again, this time sounding like a wet giggle. But she likes to play, hide, and seek. Suddenly, all screens turned off at once. The room plunged into total darkness. Right by my ear, in that pitch-black space, I heard a whisper, not from the phone, but from right behind me. Found you. Survival reflex was faster than thought. I didn't turn back to look. I didn't scream. I swung my right arm back in a wide arc, smashing the heavy flashlight into the empty space where the voice just came from. Thwack! The flashlight hit something. Not metal, not brick wall. It was soft, wet, and elastic, like hitting a slab of pork hanging in a slaughterhouse. An ear-piercing screech rang out, not like a human voice, but like steam escaping from a pressure cooker with a broken valve. I seized that moment to lunge forward, crashing into the door of room 350 and tumbling out into the hallway. As soon as I hit the ground, living hell officially opened up. Boom! All the fluorescent lights on the ceiling exploded simultaneously, raining glass down with a crash. But darkness did not engulf me. Instead, the emergency alarm light system, which had never worked, suddenly flared to life. The whole corridor was bathed in a blinking blood red rendered as intense gray-white contrast. Honk, honk, honk. The fire alarm roared, but it was distorted, low and muddy, sounding like a giant beast dying. And mixed in was the frantic beep, beep, beep from dozens of nurse call panels along the hallway. Every door I saw, 351, 352, 353. The nurse call lights above them were blazing, not the usual orange-red. They shone white, blinding like car headlights, beaming straight into my eyes. I scrambled to my feet, hands still clutching the tiny, useless folding knife. The smell of rotting meat was now so strong I could taste the bile in my mouth. I turned my head back to room 350. In the flashing red light of the alarm, I saw it step out. That was not the nurse from before. Or rather, not just her. The entity was towering, head nearly touching the ceiling. It seemed stitched together from many different body parts. It wore a tattered white lab coat, stained with old reddish-brown. But the most terrible thing was that it had so many arms. Skinny, pale arms sprouted from its back and ribs, twitching incessantly like centipede legs. Each hand was holding something: a syringe, a scalpel, a pair of forceps. The loudspeaker boomed again, this time so loud it shook the floor beneath my feet. Code Blue. Code Blue in room 366. Dr. Mark, report immediately for resuscitation. Dr. Mark? It's calling me. It wants me to go deeper. The entity started lunging towards me. It didn't walk. It crawled on the floor and walls with that jumble of limbs, at a terrifying speed. The sound of bones clicking, clashing with the siren, created a symphony of madness. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was running, only that I had to get away from that thing. The corridor began to contract. Literally. The walls on both sides heaved like gasping lungs, narrowing the passage. The floor beneath me became soft, sticky, like running on the tongue of a living creature. You can't abandon the patient, Mark. The voice echoed from everywhere. Now no longer a mechanical voice, but the voice of my mother? The patient is waiting in room 366. I covered my ears, eyes closed, bursting through a large double door at the end of the hall, hoping it was the emergency exit. I burst in, and I froze. In front of me was not the stairwell. It was a massive, freezing operating theater with a lone operating table in the center under blinding surgical lights. And on that table was me. Another version of me, lying motionless, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, chest pried open with metal retractors. The scene before me completely paralyzed my brain. A cold sensation ran from my heels to the top of my head, stronger than any fear I had ever experienced. It was me, wearing the dark blue security uniform, name tag Mark, a small crescent-shaped scar on the left eyebrow, from a bicycle accident at age 12. Everything was accurate to the last detail. The only thing was, my chest was wide open. Cold metal clamps held the ribs apart, revealing an empty chest cavity. Heart and lungs were gone. The smell of fresh blood rose pungent, warm, and fishy, overpowering the chemical cleaner smell. No. Impossible. I backed away, bumping into a surgical instrument tray. The sound of metal clattering to the floor was ear-splitting, like a death knell. Suddenly, the corpse on the table opened its eyes. Cloudy eyes, no iris, staring blankly at the ceiling. Its lips moved, soundless, but I could read the mouth shape. Run. Bam. The double doors behind me were bashed off their hinges. That multi-armed monster had caught up. It squeezed its massive, distorted body through the narrow frame, secondary arms gripping the wooden frame, crushing it into sawdust. Patient Mark, it hissed, the voice coming from a gaping hole where a mouth should be, full of drool and black blood. Your heart. We found a recipient. Immediate transplant needed. It lunged. One of the arms holding a scalpel swung, slashing across my shoulder. The sharp blade cut through the thick shirt, carving a burning line on my flesh. Pain pulled me back to reality. I wasn't dead. I was still alive, and I will not lie on that table. I I looked around frantically for a weapon. Nothing but tiny surgical scissors. But my gaze stopped at the right wall, in the real world, or at least in my memory of the building map. The location of this operating room, if it existed on the 3rd floor, would be at the corner of the building, which means that wall must be a window. But currently, it was a giant mirror reflecting this hellish scene. Me being cornered by a spider-human monster, and my own corpse trying to sit up on the operating table. I have to gamble. Gamble with my life. That the building's actual architecture still lies somewhere beneath this ghostly shell. I grabbed the heavy steel oxygen tank standing in the corner. "Get back!" I screamed. Not at the monster, but at my own fear. I put all my strength into it, spun around, and hurled the oxygen tank at the large mirror on the wall. Clang! The sound of metal hitting glass rang out sharply. The mirror cracked into spiderwebs. The monster howled, lunging to grab my leg. Cold, slimy fingers tightened around my ankle like iron pliers. "Stay here. We need your heart." I fell face down, being dragged towards the operating table. My fingernails clawed desperately at the slippery tile floor. The corpse on the table suddenly lunged up. It didn't attack me. It lunged at the monster. That heartless, lungless corpse threw itself into that jumble of limbs, biting down hard on the arm holding my leg. Black blood sprayed. The monster roared in pain, loosening its grip for a second. That was all I needed. I scrambled up, grabbed a nearby stainless steel stool, and smashed it with all my might into the crack on the mirror. Smash! The mirror shattered, and the illusion vanished. No wall. Only the cold night wind rushing in. It was a glass window, and outside was the pitch-black void of the night. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself through the shattered window frame, leaving the frantic screaming and the smell of rotting meat behind. I fell into the darkness. I braced myself for death. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the impact that would crush my bones on the parking lot concrete. But instead, my body crashed into something dry, snapping and cracking. Branches whipped my face, stinging my flesh. Then came a hard slam onto the damp earth, forcing all the air out of my lungs. I lay still, gasping to regain my breath. The smell of mud, rotting leaves, and night dew hit my nose. Those were the best scents I had ever smelled. It was the smell of the real world. No smell of rotting meat. No smell of burning ozone. I groaned, trying to move my limbs. Pain. My left ankle was swollen, and my right shoulder burned where the scalpel had slashed. But I could still move. The old, overgrown azalea bush growing right against the building wall had broken my fall from the 3rd floor. I scrambled up, escaped the thicket, and looked up. Street Jude Hospital stood there, towering, pitch black against the cloudy night sky. An inanimate, silent block of concrete. No blazing red alarm lights. No honk. Honk. Sirens. No loudspeakers calling code blue. All windows were pitch dark. Except one. On the 3rd floor, the final corner window was shattered wide open. The remaining glass shards reflected the dim moonlight like sharp teeth in a gaping mouth. And as I squinted to look closer, my heart tightened again. Inside that shattered window frame, in the dense darkness of the room, I saw a small red light spot. Beep. Beep. It was the light of the nurse call lamp. It blinked twice, then died out, like a winking goodbye. I didn't wait to see if it would light up again. I turned and limped for my life towards my beat-up old Honda parked alone in the vast lot. I dropped the keys twice because my hands were shaking so bad. It felt like 1,000 eyes were staring at the back of my neck from those pitch-black windows. Start. Please. The engine groaned, coughed a few times, then roared to life. I stomped the gas. The car lurched forward, speeding out of the hospital gate, leaving Street Jude sinking into the darkness behind in the rearview mirror. When I reached the main road, under the safe yellow streetlights, I finally dared to look at the clock on the dashboard. The numbers glowed a cold green. 3:33 a.m., the exact time of death of the patient in room 325 that I heard in the hallucination, or in that twisted reality. 2 weeks have passed since that night. I never went back to Street Jude to pick up my pay or return the keys. I sent a brief resignation email, threw away my old SIM card, and moved in with a friend in another city. I lied that I fell off my bike to explain the limp and the long wound on my shoulder. The slash on my shoulder healed into a scar, but it didn't heal normally. The scar was raised, purplish red, and had a strange shape. Whenever the weather turned cold, it throbbed with pain. If you look closely, really closely, those scar tissues look like numbers, 3 to 6 minus 6. The number of the operating room where I lay. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that night I had inhaled toxic mold spores in the old building and hallucinated, then injured myself jumping from the floor in a panic. That is the most logical explanation, the most scientific, but there are things that science cannot explain. Last night, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom at midnight. My friend's apartment was very modern, clean, nothing like Street Jude, but when I spit the toothpaste into the sink, I heard it. Very small, very faint, echoing from behind the shiny tiled wall, right by the towel rack. Squeak, squeak. The sound of dry oiled metal wheels rolling on the floor, and then a soft click of an electric relay. I snapped my head up to look in the mirror. In a split second, before I could blink, I swear I saw my reflection in the mirror not holding a toothbrush. That reflection was wearing a blood-stained white lab coat, and its chest was wide open. It smiled at me. Now, I dare not sleep with the lights off, and I have taken down all the mirrors in the house. But I know it is useless, because this morning, when I woke up, I found a yellow sticky note stuck on the refrigerator. The handwriting was scrawled, shaky, exactly like the handwriting I had seen, in the closet in room 311. It wrote just 3 words: time for meds.